Jack Dorsey's latest comments. Now, Dorsey, who's the former chief executive of Twitter, said that Indian government had made requests to muzzle farmers' protest and block particular journalists that were critical of the government. He also alleged that government had threatened to shut down the social media network in the country if it refused to follow suit. Now, the comments have met criticism from the ruling dispensation, which has called them, and I quote, outright lies, while also calling out Twitter for not complying with the law of the land. In fact, the Minister of State for IT, Rajeev Chandrasekhar, said that Twitter was in non-compliance of the law repeatedly from 2020 to 2022. Of course, allegations and counter-allegations being made here by former chief executive of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, on government, and government, of course, coming out heavily against him, saying that Twitter, in fact, was not in compliance with the law of the land. I want to quickly throw open this discussion with what has been said from both the parties so far. One party, of course, being the chief executive, former chief executive of Twitter, who is no more at the helm of power, but
founder and former chief executive.
Founder, so, founder, but no more at helm of power. And he made, of course, those sort of allegations talking about his time when he was the chief executive. But government also has come out and quashed all of those allegations, Karthik.
Again, Shweta, I am sure my friend Rakesh would not agree with me at all on this one, but my point is, what has Jack Dorsey got to gain by coming out with these allegations today?
Okay.
I know the timing can be questioned, that he's no longer the CEO and he should have opened his mouth when he was at the helm of affairs, which he no longer is. But the point is, why would he open his trap even today if there wasn't any truth to what he is trying to allege?
Well, I mean,
yes, Rakesh. No, we were waiting for you.
I'm all for free speech, and both India and US are votaries of democracy. I call India the mother of democratic civilization, and US, of course, has a great track record. We are no less; they are no more. In that sense, Jack Dorsey is welcome to state his piece. Remember, we had this debate about democracy in India, and we had our senior opposition leader Rahul Gandhi, rightly so, creating some noise in the US, and this was followed by a US government official at the topmost level saying last week that democracy is thriving in India. Now Prime Minister Modi is going to be in US in a couple of weeks, or maybe even less.
Right.
So the timing is suspect, number one. Number two, Jack Dorsey, when he was in India, he met Prime Minister in 2018. I don't remember the months and dates. He did all the bells and whistles that normally these big ticket CEOs and founders come, very excited of India, wearing a kurta, and he met Shah Rukh Khan at a party at late night in Bombay. All that is fine. He also had a meeting with women journalists where he held a placard. Now there is dispute about that. Did he hold that placard or someone put at his back? I guess he's not that innocent.
Okay.
So that placard said that down with Brahminical order.
Okay. Patriarchy.
Patriarchy.
No, Brahminical.
Brahminical patriarchy.
Brahminical patriarchy, which is worse.
Okay.
So, I mean, if you say Brahminical order, and then Brahminical patriarchy,
Okay.
if he's on a visit to India where he wants to do business with India, there is some room for optics.
Okay.
Whereas there is a lot of room for freedom of expression in this country. You can go and abuse anyone in this country on Twitter, on social media, despite charge of the entire share of voice being monopolized. Despite that, everybody and anyone can say anything on Twitter right away.
Okay.
And so there is.
I mean, I personally never understood the problem with either Brahminical or patriarchy. I mean, both of them are. One is a caste construct. One is against social, equality, egalitarianism. So I'm a big supporter of that statement.
Anand Mahindra going to US and saying they're down with the
discrimination
the
against blacks. Absolutely,
no,
why not?
But that's not their core KRA. What are we doing?
Okay.
Are we activists?
But a bad is bad.
Are we Andolan Jeevis? Or we are businessmen? There's a certain code of conduct when you conduct business.
Okay.
You can do this in your private drawing room without cameras.
I mean, I have no problem if
No,
Anand Mahindra were to go to the US and hold a placard that says down with discrimination against black people.
You might not have a problem if he does in private. If you do it in public, there is a problem.
I mean, a bad is a bad, a public or private.
No,
One has to take a public.
See, as an individual, everybody has a right to say what he wants to say, whether it's Jack Dorsey or Anand Mahindra. But when you do it in public as part of a visit when you met the Prime Minister.
Is it okay for him to put that out on Twitter?
He did put
which
that
is
out.
equally on Twitter. So as long as as long as it's a private emotion,
No,
sentiment that he
to be
is,
fair to Jack
or
Dorsey-
opinion that he is putting out
No,
in
no,
public, doesn't matter which platform or what means he's using to put it out.
He said that it was put there, it was not my statement. I mean, I think that was more of a damage control. Second, Jack Dorsey left Twitter in ruins. You know, and as a businessman, I wouldn't say he's highly creditable.
Okay.
Jack Dorsey is not in the picture today. What is his locus standard to make these loud statements? Has current Twitter leadership endorsed this? I would like to watch what our friend Elon Musk is saying on this.
Right.
Because shoot and scoot politics is global. And when it comes from bigger so-called figureheads who are in the past tense, it makes bigger news, unfortunately. Nuisance is news. The new nuance is nuisance.
Okay.
So I'm not denying that there is pressure. Now coming to the merits of Twitter and Government of India, there are challenges. As I said in the morning also in our discussion, Twitter, Meta, they've all been refusing to co-locate their screens here in this country so that we can have access to data. Imagine developed countries. Twitter is not only been handled that way in India. China completely blacked out all American companies. And they're happy, they're not crying about that. Have you ever seen Jack Dorsey saying, oh, what if I was in China? And he never did, because they know it's shut and out, it's out. India is a democracy, so you can come and say anything. So he has a fair right to articulate a point of view.
Okay.
I'm in complete agreement with that. But it has to be backed by some evidence.
Okay.
And most importantly, I would like to hear from today's leadership, what is their take on this?
Absolutely.
Because these statements, Shweta, have far-reaching consequences on India, brand India. Forget about Modi and Kejriwal and Rahul Gandhi. These statements portray India in a very bad light. And it is fair and right for Government of India or any government in the world to exercise that control. I mean, we had we had the Indian flag being burnt on the streets of Delhi at Lal Killa. If India wanted to flag down some of the farmer protests, what's wrong with that? How worse can it get than actually the Indian flag being burnt on 26th January in midday light?
No, I think from what he said was he was talking about the Twitter accounts that was supportive of farmers' protest, and I'm sure there's no harm in letting
there is
Twitter
an entire
accounts
ecosystem
or
that I'm talking about.
I understand, sir, and we may not agree with
No, fair
farmers'
enough,
protest,
yes.
absolutely. And we'll come back to this. This is an important discussion, interesting one at that. But let's quickly listen into what the IT Minister of State for Information Technology, had to say on Jack Dorsey's comments.
Jack Dorsey was the CEO of Twitter during a very, very dubious period in Twitter's history. What he has said is an outright lie, and I have said that publicly, and I'm reiterating it again. Twitter is a company that believed that it was not necessary for it to comply with Indian law. It believed that it did not have to comply with Indian law and made up its rules as it went along. And the Government of India has been very clear from the very beginning, for all companies that operate in India, they have to always comply with Indian law. That is point number one. Point number two, I just want to refresh Jack Dorsey's memory, and certainly all your viewers, that between 2020 and 2022, Twitter was violating Indian law multiple times. And it was in non-compliance several times during those 2 years. And it started complying only in June 2022. During that entire period, nobody went to jail. Nobody was raided. And so Jack Dorsey, knowing fully well that Twitter did not comply with Indian law and did not face any consequence of that, is today lying and making up this story about raids and arrests. Third point, that Twitter now, it is there now in public domain that Twitter during this period was not only partisan, was behaving in an absolutely arbitrary manner, and the Twitter files that have then come out after Jack Dorsey sold Twitter has exposed Twitter to be a platform that abused its power, misused its power, and de-amplified many people, as in muted their voices, de-platformed many people, as in permanently took them off Twitter, totally in violation of Article 14 and Article 19 of our Constitution. And they did this in India, they did this in the US, and this information is now available in the public domain for everybody to read and see. And therefore, we have always maintained, the government of India has always maintained that our objectives are to ensure that the internet is safe and trusted, that every intermediary like Twitter, foreign or Indian, big or small, must be always compliant with Indian law. And our laws have very clear provisions about weaponizing of misinformation, which is what Twitter did during the entire period of 2020, where they weaponized misinformation against the Indians and the government of India.
Okay, some very interesting points made there by Rajeev Chandrasekhar. He talks about how Twitter was not in compliance with the law of the land between 20 to 2020, to essentially 2 years when Jack Dorsey was still in power. Krishna, I want to bring you into this conversation and quickly understand from you. It would have been helpful had Rajeev Chandrasekhar mentioned which laws were not in compliance, and all of those details were missing, of course, from that soundbite, interesting soundbite, but some very coherent points mentioned there, that there has not been a single raid, not a single employee of Twitter's behind bars. So all of this appears to be a soundbite by Jack Dorsey.
Right. As far as Twitter is concerned, and its tiff with the Indian government is concerned, it has had its run-ins with the administrations in the US. It is officially blocked in China. So it is not like Twitter complying with with the government norms across the world has been problematic. Let's face it. In fact, for all big tech companies and big social media companies, so India is not an exception in that sense that it is facing a version from Twitter which makes it look as if it's less democratic than it is, because that's exactly what Twitter said about the US as well. And Donald Trump famously went on to accuse the platform of having an extremely leftist bias. So this Twitter being accused of having a bias, being partial towards certain Twitter users is something that's haunted Twitter forever. Strangely, somehow, despite all the allegations, people still, enjoy Twitter. People still have a good time on Twitter. People who hate Twitter want to know what's on Twitter. People who love Twitter are on Twitter. So, that's the reason why I'm very ambivalent on this, because there is a problem with the big social media. Imagine Sam Altman, the co-founder or the founder of ChatGPT, was in India last week. And he was in India as part of a global tour because he believes that there needs to be a United Nations to regulate the use of artificial intelligence. Mm-hmm. So you're looking at artificial intelligence at the beginning stage and thinking it's going to be such a big problem that you need to regulate it. When social media came, we thought this is a great toy. Let's play with this toy. It's so much fun, isn't it? And then now you know what it can be. It's so dangerous. It can be potentially so dangerous to democracy itself. So you're going to have conflicting points of view. Yes, the problem here is that Jack Dorsey is not the current CEO of Twitter. It would have been really a lot of fun if that were the case, and those meetings to happen. But then, fully with Jack Dorsey, with the fact that freedom of speech and expression, he's allowed to say his piece, and he did say his piece. And as far as India's Twitterverse is concerned, the reactions went from outright lies and who is Jack Dorsey? He is a nobody to what is new.
Okay.
Of course, another social media company says, Indian government is not allowing it to operate properly.
Okay, so a lot of diversity there in opinion, but of course, going back to what he said essentially, and what he said is that it was a lot of coercion from the government to block certain accounts, to block certain individuals, journalists specifically, and if not, then we would be raided. I mean, that is of course the diktat from the government, which only he has said so far. Nobody else from Twitter has said. And let's also admit to current Twitter administration not coming on record to say either endorse it or dismiss it. So we haven't heard.
Twitter administration has other interests in India as well. For example, Tesla's entry into India. Right. But I think Krishna highlighted a very interesting point. And remember, Jack Dorsey was the CEO of Twitter when Donald Trump's account was suspended. Right. And it took an Elon Musk, alleged leftist to an extreme rightist, to come and reinstate that account, right? And now God knows what happens to that account if and when Donald Trump goes behind bars. But that's a different story altogether.
He has his own destiny, Trump.
That's Tommy one of that.
Couple of points,
But
yeah, please.
sorry, I'll just. So the point I was actually coming to was that Twitter overall, ever since its inception, has stood as a platform that offers a free voice to everybody,
Okay.
regardless of what your locus standi in life is, right? Now, of course, when innovators come, product guys come, tech guys come, they tinker with algorithms, they promote certain sections of opinion, they de-promote certain sections of opinion. So now all that is, of course, I mean, it's all out there for some jury eventually to figure out what Twitter really did or did not do if those allegations were to be investigated further. But the simple point really is that, you know, what is the reason for the government to now get so defensive about a statement by a nobody called Jack Dorsey? Why are you getting defensive? If he's a nobody, he will have a lowly life and he's going to, you know, the news item is just going to pass away like mostly it does.
In defense of
in
that,
sense, he's not a nobody because, you know, whatever he says, you know, as I have
He
this
currently
way-
runs Block Inc., which is a blockchain company.
No,
which is
not about his current credentials. What is that he is hitting out at government of India. There are entrenched interests here and abroad, which they have a right to do so. So that's a large constituency, especially on Twitter. I mean, there's a large constituency on social media which plays by the book, and he's playing that book in that sense. So he's not a nobody on Twitter.
You're referring to some kind of a toolkit?
No, I mean, no. So, but I have a larger question for social media. See, now, I mean, let's move away and focus away from what Government of India debate versus, you know, point and counterpoint. As I said, here in media, you know, traditional media versus social media.
Okay.
There is a larger debate going forward, Shweta, where we have to look at what is the framework for social media like Twitter or Meta to bring about a filter. You know, they have enabled two things to my mind, which is revolutionary. One is they have digitized governance, especially from a citizen perspective. Look at the kind of help Twitter has done whenever there's a tragedy, whenever there's a crisis, man-made or natural, God-made. You know, Twitter has been like a beacon of hope, and, you know, someone crying that I don't have medicine or my child is unwell in a railway department, and it goes to the minister, and then the entire, you know, paraphernalia comes in. It's all because of Twitter. So there is no intermediary between a power, if it wants to exercise its due duty, and a social media platform. But when it comes to news and opinion on issues which are of national and international importance, I'm afraid they are masquerading as, you know, media platforms, news media platforms, without, I'm not saying news media is perfect. We have our own enormous shortcomings.
Okay.
But, you know, masquerading as a news media platform with such tremendous clout without any responsibility. We have the courts here, we have the independent news, you know, body, we have the Press Council of India, we have one in television, and, you know, we are watched repeatedly, not just by the government regulators, but by own, you know, independent bodies. In that sense, who is watching Twitter? Who is watching Meta? And anything and everything can be posted. So there's a very, very positive side to Twitter. It has, so to say, you know,
and the risks
and the risks
associated
associated.
with.
No, it must come clean and say that I'm a news media platform.
Okay.
And then whatever are the rules and regulations of a news media platform, you know, it can't find the sweet spot, make all the noises, get all the revenues, get all the attention, get all the valuations, and then have a voice which is
But that's
unsubstantiated.
where I disagree, because it is a platform. It is not really a service. It's not a news service. Twitter in itself is not generating or reporting on stories. It is enabling anybody
The
to
platform is a
post
bigger
on that
curse.
platform. User-generated content, UGC. YouTube does that.
No, Karthik, when you put out something on your platform, this is going on YouTube Live or many other platforms. We know what we are putting out.
That's right.
Here
Because
in
we
this
are,
case,
we are
there is no filter.
because
they
we
claim
are
to have-
news people,
Yeah,
we
so
are journalists, so we are expected to dish out whatever information
absolutely.
we hold true.
Yeah, we say news is sacred, comment is free.
Yeah.
But when comment becomes a virus, you know, on either side, look at the way Twitter has polarized Indian polity. And it is allowing...
Or has it allowed people to express their opinions on either side of the two poles?
No, the level of opinion, Karthik, let's face it, a level of opinion in a Hindu editorial or an Indian Express or a Times of India, my former paper, I'm putting it at the end,
Yeah.
is, look at the level. You can't, I mean, trigger happy opinion makers, are they qualified to say that? I'm saying we are all for freedom of expression, but freedom of expression has also to operate within a certain preamble. That preamble cannot be completely taken away because you're a tech aggregator and you can, you know, host and post anything without any responsibility. I'm asking for responsibility.
My question
Right.
is simple,
You know, okay,
Shweta.
but
My
my own-
question, sorry, Krishna,
Yes.
I'll give you a
Please
minute.
go ahead, please go ahead.
My question is simple. Does Jack Dorsey have any reason to lie at this stage about what happened 3 years ago? Question number one, right? I'm not looking for answers. I'm just posing these questions. Question number one, does he have reason to lie? Question number two, what has the government got to do by defending its stance against
No, it's
what
not
Jack
a
Dorsey
defense,
said?
Karthik. It's articulating what it said 2 years
sure.
ago.
Was it
so it's not a defense.
Is there
no, why not? If someone is abusing you, you have a right. We
All
are
right.
good. We
All
have a
right.
right to say that. Come on, I
I agree
need
with
to be
that
challenged.
partly. I mean,
All right.
absolutely. If there are allegations,
All
then,
right,
then
but-
somebody
and
has
point
got
number
the
three
right.
really
You can't allow
be-
Mark to stick.
And question number 3, whatever Jack Dorsey has said, is that going to have a business impact on India? Most definitely yes.
Okay.
Is it going to raise antennae of other technology and non-technology companies wanting to do business in India to take a second guess at their own decision? Definitely yes. So question number 4, what should the government do to ensure, not just by way of statements, but to empirically with evidence ensure that there is no intervention with vested interests in businesses to run freely in this country?
And if I may add, it must bring all social media platforms in congruity with the law of the land. That is, we must have co-location of servers like US has. That is the first and the foremost point. If we have co-location, which they've still not agreed on, that's the fundamental fight. You agree on that, then we are on an equal footing. We are democratic about it.
Okay. Okay. And until then?
Until then, Jack Dorsey
Until
can
then.
have his say.
Until then, Jack Dorsey can say what he wants to say. Yes,
Yeah.
Krishna.
Right. Interestingly enough, it's always the ruling governments that have issues with the levels of freedom of speech and expression. When the same parties are the opposition, they have a
Making a
different
very
view on
obvious point.
freedom of speech and expression. Once they become the ruling government parties, and they're like, oh no, you can't talk that much. But when we are the opposition, we should be allowed to speak more. Seems to be the case everywhere across the world.
Okay.
And what is actually more devious is this: you have a Trump, a president like Trump, accusing another platform of having leftist bias. When you talk about locus standi, I mean, it's somebody like Trump who has no locus standi to call somebody else a leftist, because he's in the right of the right of the right of the right. So the funny thing is that when allegations are
The good thing about journalism is that CNN called him for a what we call a town hall.
A town hall.
It led to a further turmoil
at CNN.
Well, that was one hell of a town hall, I must say.
No, what I'm trying to say is that that's the difference between a news organization and a social media platform.
Okay. And
And
Yes,
the
Krishna.
tiff between governments and social media companies is going to continue for a very long time, simply because, as I'll go back to the same point, we haven't found a way to see how social media is going to exist in our worlds without harming us. If social media needs to be regulated, then who is the regulator and who regulates the regulator? If you have every ruling government, because
Starts
how it works is
regulating,
the way I see it is really simple. If you say something against a country, then the current ruling government is going to look at it and go like, you are accusing us.
Can I
Whereas
just
you're
quickly?
just accusing the country.
Actually, you're not accusing the country. You're accusing the government.
Yeah,
Let's not equate the government with the country.
No,
exactly.
there are co-linkages. Forget whichever government of the day is that. If you're putting a question mark of democracy in India, it is accusing the country.
Okay. But the ruling dispensation in the country.
No, I mean, ruling dispensation is administering, that instrument. It is supposed to administer that instrument under the sovereign cover. So if it is not administering democracy, it's a question mark for itself as well.
Okay. Okay.
And we have enough, so to say, point of views within the country to say that X government is not fair and democratic.
Okay.
The one point I'd like to add is that somehow it's so funny.
And
People from both ends of the ideological spectrum have issues with the social media platform. The leftists complain there's a rightist bias, and the rightists complain there's a leftist bias. I wonder
And
where
they're
the
all
actual
on the
bias
same
is.
social media
They're all on social
platforms
media.
and
Krishna,
battling it out there on the
that
same
doesn't mean
platforms.
everything is right about the social media.
Not, I mean, I'm very ambivalent. I really wish people
To begin
tweeted
with-
less.
to
I really
begin-
wish people Instagrammed less and Facebook less. I wish people spoke like we speak amongst each other and really had a
Right.
real conversation.
And this is
but that's
as-
not up to me, sir.
Finally,
And
Krishna,
wait
this is-
until a chunk from this goes back on Twitter.
if I can have the final word here, with your
Okay.
permission.
Please.
See, ultimately, technology companies are controlling the share of voice and share of mind.
Right.
So it's not about one individual country, India and China or US and Australia, which has tightened the screws on this on Meta in terms of sharing content with their own news platforms. They have to pay local news
Right.
platforms.
Yeah.
Right.
So in that sense, that is the larger game plan. Ultimately, we know about the colonial rule. Now our technology companies, especially the global ones, are they the new mind colonialists? And should governments of the day collectively challenge that? I would say yes. To begin with, bring about co-location of servers.
Okay, of course. The social media, this is as democratic as it gets, you know. It's as democratic as it gets. Questions, of course, being raised by Jack Dorsey there, and Government of India responding appropriately. It is a battle of opinion. It is a battle of what happened, what did not happen. Nothing there to substantiate whether the Government of India did intervene at any point in time. But Jack Dorsey, of course, has the right to express his speech. He's free to do so. It is a vibrant democracy that we have here in India.